My brother mocked me for being just a janitor in front of the city's elite. But when his wife asked what exactly I cleaned, I said one word that made the entire room go silent. Her face went pale and he finally realized who I really was. But before I could enjoy that sweet moment of revenge, I had to survive the night that started it all. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family members who underestimated your worth. My name is Sophia, and at 35 years old, I have mastered the art of being invisible. To the world, and especially to my family, I am just Sophia. The struggle, the one who drives a dented Honda Accord and buys her clothes from the clearance rack. They think my hands are rough because I scrub floors for a living. They are right about the scrubbing, but they are wrong about everything else. The neon sign of the Sapphire Lounge buzzed overhead as I pulled my battered silver sedan up to the valet stand. This was one of the most exclusive venues in Atlanta, the kind of place where a bottle of water costs more than an hour of minimum wage. I could feel the valet's eyes judging me as I stepped out. I was wearing a simple navy blue dress I had bought at a discount store, comfortable but far from the designer gowns gliding through the front doors. I took a deep breath. This was Darius and Chloe's 10th anniversary party. My brother Darius was the family's golden child, a regional sales director for a software company who made sure everyone knew exactly how much money he made. Tonight was supposed to be his night, and my only job was to show up, smile, and not embarrass him. I walked toward the glass entrance, but before I could reach the handle, a hand shot out and grabbed my arm. It was my mother, Patricia. She was wearing a sequined gold gown that was a little too tight, her hair perfectly stiff with hairspray. "What do you think you are doing coming in the front?" she hissed, her voice low and sharp. "Look at you. You look like you just came off a shift. We have important guests here, Sophia. Investors, people who matter." I pulled my arm away gently. "Mom, I was invited. It is my brother's anniversary." She looked me up and down with that familiar expression of disappointment she had perfected over 3 decades. "If you insist on coming inside, try to stand near the walls. Do not mingle. And for God's sake, if anyone asks, just say you are helping with the catering. Do not tell anyone what you actually do." I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded. I walked past her into the ballroom. The room was breathtaking, filled with crystal chandeliers and the smell of expensive perfume and ambition. Waiters circulated with trays of champagne, moving silently through the crowd of men in tuxedos and women in silk. I spotted my father Otis laughing loudly at the bar with a group of Darius's colleagues. Dad was holding a glass of scotch that I knew he couldn't afford. My parents had sold their paid-off home 3 years ago to help Darius cover a gambling debt they called a business investment, and now they lived in a rented condo that I secretly subsidized. But in this room, they were the proud parents of a successful executive, and I was the shameful secret. I found a quiet corner and grabbed a glass of water. I just wanted to make an appearance, give them my gift, and leave. But Darius had other plans. The music lowered, and a spotlight hit the small stage at the front of the room. Darius stood there holding a microphone, beaming with that charismatic smile that had charmed investors and our parents his whole life. Next to him stood Chloe, his wife. She was beautiful in a chilly, manufactured way, her platinum blonde hair cascading over a silver dress that probably cost more than my car. "Thank you all for coming," Darius boomed, his voice projecting confidence. "Tonight is about love and success. And speaking of success, I want to introduce someone special." My stomach dropped. He was looking right at me. "My little sister Sophia. Come on up here, Soph." I froze. This wasn't part of the plan. My mother was glaring at me from the front row, her eyes widening in warning. But the spotlight swung around and found me. The room applauded politely. I had no choice. I kept my head down and walked up the stairs to the stage. Darius draped a heavy arm around my shoulder. He smelled of expensive cologne and scotch. "I wanted to bring Sophia up here because she keeps us humble," Darius said, a smirk playing on his lips. You see, while I am out there closing million-dollar software deals and upgrading enterprise systems, Sophia here is doing the Lord's work. He paused for dramatic effect. Sophia is a janitor. She keeps our city sanitary. A ripple of nervous laughter went through the crowd. I felt the heat rising in my cheeks. He wasn't doing this to honor me. He was doing this to elevate himself by standing next to someone he considered beneath him. She works the night shift, scrubbing toilets and mopping floors so people like us can work in clean offices. Darius continued, squeezing my shoulder tighter. Let's give it up for the blue-collar backbone of the family. Just a janitor, but we love her anyway. The applause was scattered and awkward. I stood there humiliated, my hands clenching into fists at my sides. I looked at Chloe. She was covering her mouth, trying to hide a giggle. Then she leaned into the microphone. Oh, honey, you are so sweet to include her. Sophia, come give me a hug. I stepped forward instinctively, but as I got close, Chloe took a visible step back, wrinkling her nose. Oh, actually, maybe just a wave is fine, Chloe said, her voice amplified through the speakers for everyone to hear. No offense, sweetie, but I think I can smell the bleach on you. I do not want it to ruin the silk. It is Versace, you know. The room went deadly silent. That was it. The snap. I had spent 10 years building a commercial cleaning and hazardous waste management empire from the ground up. I had contracts with the city, with hospitals, and yes, with the very building Darius worked in. I didn't just clean floors. I managed 300 employees and owned a portfolio of commercial real estate worth $45 million. I had kept it secret to protect myself from their greed, to see if they could love me without the money. I looked at Darius, who was grinning like a shark. I looked at Chloe, who was looking at me like I was a stain on her carpet. I reached out and took the microphone from Darius's hand. Darius looked surprised but let me take it, expecting a stuttering thank you. I looked out at the crowd. I saw my mother in the front row, her face pale with rage that I was holding the mic. I took a breath. I was ready. I was going to tell them everything. I was going to tell them that the Honda was a decoy. I was going to tell Darius that the only reason he still had a job was because the owner of his building had personally intervened to stop his eviction, and that owner was me. Actually, Darius the First, began, my voice steady and strong. There is something you should know about the janitor business. Suddenly, a loud crash came from the front row. My father Otis had collapsed onto his knees, clutching his chest. Otis! My mother screamed. Oh my God, his heart! The room erupted into chaos. Darius snatched the microphone back from me and jumped off the stage. People rushed toward my father. I stood there frozen. I watched as my father groaned loudly, making a show of gasping for air. But then, for a split second amidst the panic, I saw his eyes dart up to meet mine. He wasn't in pain. He was glaring at me. It was a look of pure warning. He knew. He didn't know about the money, but he knew I was about to fight back, and he had thrown himself on a grenade to stop me. He was faking a heart attack to keep the scapegoat in her place. Darius looked back at me from the floor, holding Dad's hand. You see what you did? He yelled at me. You upset him. Get out of here, Sophia. Just get out. I lowered the microphone. The moment was gone. The adrenaline turned into bitter ash in my mouth. I looked at my father, who was now moaning dramatically for the crowd. I looked at my brother, playing the hero. Happy anniversary, I whispered into the dead air. I placed the microphone on the floor and walked off the stage. As I walked through the parting crowd toward the exit, I could hear the whispers. Can you believe her causing a scene like that? Poor Darius, having a sister like that. I pushed through the heavy glass doors and out into the humid Atlanta night. The valet looked up, surprised to see me back so soon. I took my keys and got into my car. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a cold, hard realization. They didn't just disrespect me. They were willing to stage a medical emergency to silence me. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my assistant, Sarah. Subject: the acquisition. Message: the paperwork for the building at 500 Peachtree Street is finalized. You are officially the new landlord of TechSoft Solutions. Do you want to send the introduction email on Monday? I looked at the text. TechSoft Solutions. Darius's company. I looked back at the glowing lights of the Sapphire Lounge. No, I typed back. Wait until the rent is due. I put the car in gear and drove away. They wanted a janitor. Fine. I was going to clean house. And I was going to start with the trash at the top. The valet looked apologetic as he pulled my silver 2005 Honda Accord up to the curb. The brakes squealed loudly, a high-pitched screech that cut through the low murmur of the departing guests. Beside the sleek lineup of Mercedes and BMWs waiting for their owners, my car looked like a bruised tin can. I tipped the valet a 20 more than the cost of the gas in the tank and reached for the door handle. But before I could get in, a polished black dress shoe slammed against the rear bumper. The sound of metal crunching made me jump. I whipped around to see Darius standing there, his face flushed with alcohol and adrenaline. He adjusted his silk tie, looking at my car with unmasked disgust. "You have got to be kidding me, Sophia." He kicked the tire this time, leaving a scuff mark on the rubber. "I asked you to park this heap around the back," he hissed, stepping into my personal space. "Do you know who is watching? My boss is standing right over there by the fountain. What is he going to think when he sees the regional director's sister driving a car that belongs in a scrapyard?" I looked at the dent he had just made. It was small, but it was there. "It gets me from point A to point B. Darius," I said calmly, fighting the urge to tell him that the engine in this car was probably more reliable than his credit score. He laughed, a cruel barking sound. "Point A to point B. You mean from the trailer park to the dumpster? Look at that, Sophia." He pointed a manicured finger toward a gleaming white Porsche Cayenne parked in the VIP spot. "That is what success looks like. That is what a winner drives. Please, for the love of God, do not park this embarrassment anywhere near my car. You are lowering the property value just by idling here." I gripped my car keys until my knuckles turned white. The irony was suffocating. I knew for a fact that the Porsche was a lease, and knowing Darius, he was probably 2 months behind on the payments. Meanwhile, I could have walked into the dealership tomorrow and bought the entire lot in cash, but silence was my shield. Silence was the only thing keeping them from bleeding me dry. "I will keep that in mind," I said, my voice flat. "Get out of here," he sneered, turning his back on me to wave at a colleague. "And fix that squeak. It sounds like you are killing a cat every time you brake." I drove home in silence, the humidity of the Atlanta night clinging to my skin. My house was a modest rental in a quiet neighborhood, another part of my disguise. Inside, however, it was a sanctuary. High-speed fiber optic internet. 3 monitors set up for tracking market trends, and a wine fridge stocked with vintage reds that cost more than Darius's suit. I poured myself a glass, sat in the dark, and let the anger simmer down into a cold, hard resolve. I thought the night was over. I thought I had survived the worst of it. But at 7 the next morning, my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice was not apologetic about the scene at the party. It was sharp, urgent, and devoid of warmth. "Get over here, Sophia. Now. We need to talk about your attitude." I considered not going. I considered blocking the number and letting them rot. But curiosity and a lingering, foolish hope for some kind of closure made me grab my keys. My parents lived in a 2-bedroom condo in Decatur. It was a nice place, mostly because I paid the homeowner association fees anonymously through a shell company, ensuring the grounds were kept perfect. When I walked in, the smell of stale coffee and tension hung heavy in the air. My father, Otis, was sitting at the kitchen table. He looked remarkably healthy for a man who had suffered a heart attack less than 12 hours ago. He was eating a bagel and didn't even look up when I entered. My mother, Patricia, was pacing the kitchen floor in her bathrobe. "Sit down," she commanded, pointing to a wooden chair that wobbled slightly. I remained standing. "I am fine, Mom." "What is this about?" Patricia stopped pacing and glared at me. She reached into the pocket of her robe and pulled out a crumpled envelope. She slammed it onto the table with enough force to make the coffee cups rattle. "This is what this is about," she said. I looked at the envelope. It was from the Fulton County Tax Commissioner. We got a notice, she said, her voice trembling with self-righteous anger. $15,000, Sophia. That is what we owe in back taxes and penalties on this condo. They are threatening a lien. I frowned. That didn't make sense. I knew the finances of this condo complex better than the management did. But before I could speak, my father spoke up, his mouth full of bagel. Your brother is in a tight spot, Otis said, wiping crumbs from his chin. He has all his liquidity tied up in high-yield investments. Crypto tech startups, big league stuff. You wouldn't understand the complexity of it. Right? I said, keeping my face neutral. So Darius cannot pay it. He shouldn't have to, my mother snapped. He has a family to support. He has a wife who expects a certain standard of living. He has appearances to maintain for his career. You have nothing. No husband, no kids, just that cheap apartment and that ugly car. She took a step closer to me, her eyes narrowing. We know you have savings, Sophia. You have been working that cleaning job for 10 years. You do not spend money on clothes, you do not travel, you do not do anything. You must have a pile of cash sitting under your mattress. I felt a cold pit form in my stomach. They had done the math. They had looked at my poverty and decided it was actually hoarding. I want you to go to the bank, my mother continued, crossing her arms. Withdraw $15,000 and pay this off, today. Why is this my responsibility? I asked quietly. Because we raised you, she shouted, the vein in her neck bulging. We put a roof over your head for 18 years. We fed you. We clothed you. Consider this back rent. Consider this payment for being the disappointment of the family while your brother actually went out and made something of himself. The words stung familiar and toxic. Back rent for a childhood I never asked for. I looked at the envelope again. Something wasn't right. The color of the notice was slightly off. Standard tax notices in this county were usually white with a blue header. This one was pink. Let me see it, I said, reaching for the paper. My mother snatched it back. You do not need to read it. You just need to pay it. If you want me to pay $15,000, I need to see the bill, Mom. That is how the world works. Reluctantly, she slid the paper across the table, keeping her hand on one corner, as if I might snatch it and run. I looked at the document. It was indeed a demand for payment. But my eyes scanned past the bold dollar amount, down to the fine print at the bottom, the part that usually listed the property owner and the lien holder. My breath caught in my throat. The property owner wasn't listed as Otis and Patricia Wilson, and the debt wasn't for property taxes. It was a default notice on a secondary high-interest loan, a home equity line of credit that had been taken out against the condo 6 months ago. I looked closer at the borrower's name printed in tiny bureaucratic font next to the account number. Borrower Darius Wilson. My blood ran cold. My parents didn't own this condo, they had been renting it. But somehow Darius had managed to put his name on the deed, likely forging documents or manipulating them into signing a quitclaim deed, thinking it was something else. And then he had immediately leveraged the property for a quick cash injection. He hadn't just invested their money, he had stolen the equity of the home they lived in. Mom, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Did you sign any papers for Darius back in January? Maybe something he said was for insurance or estate planning. My mother looked confused for a second, then defensive. We signed some papers to help him lower his tax bracket. He said it was a smart business move. It put the condo in a trust or something. Why? I looked up at her, and then at my father, who was innocently spreading cream cheese on a second bagel. They had no idea. They thought they were bullying me into paying a tax bill to help their golden child protect his investments. They didn't realize they were asking me to pay off the loan shark their son had invited into their living room. I looked at the date on the notice. Final notice. Foreclosure proceedings begin in 48 hours. The $15,000 wasn't the total debt. It was just the interest required to stop the immediate seizure of the house. I looked at my mother's angry, expectant face. She was ready to kick me out if I didn't pay. She was ready to disown me to protect the son who had literally sold the roof over her head. I picked up the paper and folded it slowly. "I will handle it," I said. My mother let out a breath she had been holding. "Good. Finally, you are making yourself useful. Bring the receipt by tonight." I walked out of the condo clutching the paper that was the smoking gun. I wasn't going to the bank to withdraw money. I was going to my office to call my legal team. Darius hadn't just mocked a janitor, he had committed real estate fraud. And he had no idea that the janitor he spit on was the only person in the state with the power to decide if he went to rehab or if he went to prison. As I sat in my car, I pulled up the county property records on my phone just to be sure. There it was, a transfer of deed on January 15th, and then a lien filed on January 16th. I started the engine of my Honda. The squealing belt sounded different to me now. It sounded like a countdown. Darius wanted to talk about property values. Fine. I was about to show him exactly what happens when you default on the wrong person. 2 days after the tax fiasco, my phone rang again at 6 in the morning. It was Darius. This was not the arrogant brother who had kicked my car tire. This was a man who sounded broken, terrified, and on the verge of collapse. "Sophia, you have to help us," he sobbed into the receiver. "It is Dad. His heart. It is failing." My own heart skipped a beat despite everything. The image of my father clutching his chest at the anniversary party flashed in my mind. Even though I suspected that incident was staged, the fear of losing a parent is a primal thing that bypasses logic. "Where are you?" I asked, sitting up in bed and reaching for my glasses. "We are at Piedmont Hospital," Darius cried. "The doctors say he has a severe blockage. They need to operate immediately, but the insurance is refusing to cover the specific stent he needs because it is considered experimental. Sophia, they are going to let him die if we do not put down a deposit." I felt a cold wave of suspicion wash over me, but I pushed it down. "How much is the deposit, Darius?" There was a pause on the other end, a hesitation that I would only understand fully later. $50,000, he whispered. "We need 50,000 by noon, or they cancel the surgery prep. Mom is a wreck. She is in the chapel praying. I have tried every lender, but with the house situation my credit is frozen. You are our only hope. Please, Sophia. I know we have had our differences, but this is Dad." I closed my eyes. $50,000. It was a specific number, large enough to solve a major problem, but small enough that a desperate family member might liquidate a 401k or take a predatory loan to get it. "I will be there in an hour," I said. "No," Darius shouted almost too quickly. "Do not come here. The stress causes his blood pressure to spike. The doctors banned visitors. Just wire the money to my account. I will handle the billing department. I will send you the routing number." I hung up the phone. The urgency in his voice was convincing, but the details were messy. Hospitals do not typically demand wire transfers to personal accounts for emergency life-saving surgeries. I got dressed not in my usual janitor disguise, but in a sharp charcoal gray blazer and slacks. I had a meeting with my own bankers later that morning anyway. But first I had a call to make. I sat at my kitchen island and dialed a number that was saved in my personal contacts simply as Marcus. Marcus Henderson was the chief of surgery and a board member at Piedmont Hospital. He was also a man whose scholarship fund I had anonymously donated $2 million to last year. "Marcus." "It is Sophia Green," I said when he picked up. "Sophia." He answered, his voice warm. "To what do I owe the pleasure? We are still on for the gala next month, right?" "Yes, absolutely," I said, keeping my voice professional. "I need a favor, Marcus. My father, Otis Wilson, was admitted this morning. I am hearing conflicting reports about his condition and a demand for a $50,000 cash deposit for a stent. Can you check his chart for me?" "Give me 30 seconds, he said. I heard the typing of a keyboard in the background. The silence stretched out tight as a piano wire. "Sophia," Marcus said, his tone changing from friendly to confused. "I am looking at his file right now." Otis Wilson was admitted to the emergency room at 4 a.m. complaining of chest pains. We ran a full cardiac panel, an EKG and echocardiogram and blood work, and I asked, holding my breath, "Sophia, his heart is fine. Strong as a horse, actually. The diagnosis is severe acid reflux, probably from spicy food and stress. We discharged him 20 minutes ago with a prescription for antacids. There is no surgery scheduled, and we certainly never ask for cash deposits for emergency care." I felt the blood drain from my face, not from fear, but from a white-hot rage. There was no blockage. There was no experimental stent. My father had indigestion, and my brother was trying to turn a burp into a $50,000 payday. "Thank you, Marcus," I said, my voice trembling slightly. That is all I needed to know. I hung up and looked at my phone. A text from Darius had just come through. It was a photo of a generic hospital waiting room floor, likely downloaded from Google, and his bank routing number with the message, "Please hurry. He is in pain." I did not reply. Instead, I grabbed my purse and headed to the downtown branch of Chase Bank. I needed to handle my own business transfers, and honestly, I needed to be around money to remind myself that I had the power here, not them. As I walked out of the bank an hour later, the sun was high and bright, reflecting off the glass skyscrapers. I was reviewing a contract on my phone when a shadow fell over me. Well, look who decided to play dress-up. I looked up to see Chloe, my sister-in-law, standing there in Lululemon leggings and holding an iced coffee. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my tailored blazer and the leather briefcase I was carrying. "Did you steal that from a donation bin?" Chloe asked, a smirk playing on her lips. "Or did you get a job interview?" "Let me guess, receptionist." "No, you do not have the face for the front desk. Maybe backroom filing." I adjusted my grip on the briefcase. "Hello, Chloe." She took a sip of her coffee, the ice rattling aggressively. "Darius told me about Dad. We are all so worried, and here you are strolling around downtown playing businesswoman while your father is dying. You are disgusting, Sophia. Did you at least send the money?" "He is not dying, Chloe," I said calmly. "Oh, stop it," she snapped. "Darius told me everything. He is crying his eyes out right now, but I guess you would not understand that kind of love. You are probably here trying to get a payday loan, aren't you? Trying to scrape together a few $100 to look like a hero." She leaned in closer, her perfume sickly sweet. "Let me give you some advice, honey. Stop trying to be us. You look ridiculous in that suit. It does not fit your station. Go back to your mop bucket and leave the finances to the men." I looked at her, at the condescension etched into her perfectly contoured face. She truly believed I was nothing. She believed the lie Darius had told her about my father because it suited her narrative. "Excuse me," I said, stepping around her. "I have work to do." "Work," she laughed, calling after me. "Yeah, sure. Don't forget to scrub behind the toilets." I drove home, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The audacity was suffocating. They lied about life and death. They insulted me to my face while demanding my life savings. When I got back to my home office, I sat down in front of my computer. I needed to clear my head. I opened my family's shared iCloud account. I paid for the family data plan, a relic from years ago that I had never bothered to cancel because it was easier to just pay the $100 a month than to deal with the conversation. Because I was the account administrator, every device on the plan backed up to my cloud storage. I saw a notification flashing. A backup from Darius's iPhone had just completed. Curiosity got the better of me. I opened his messages folder, expecting to see texts to Mom about the fake surgery. Instead, I saw a thread with a contact named Candy Hart. I clicked on it. The most recent message was sent 10 minutes ago, right around the time Chloe was screaming at me in the street. "Darius, just played the heart attack card with my sister. She is dumb as a rock. She is going to wire the 50,000 by noon. Candy Hart. You are bad, Lowell. Are we still on for next week? Darius, pack your bikini, babe. As soon as that transfer hits, I am booking the flights. Cabo San Lucas. Here we come. First class all the way. Do not tell Chloe. I told her the money is for Dad's medical bills, so she will get off my back about the credit cards. I sat back in my chair, the glow of the monitor illuminating the dark room. He wasn't just scamming me. He was scamming his wife. He was using his father's fake illness to fund a vacation with his mistress. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of the screen. $50,000 for a heart surgery. I looked at the text again. I was not going to send the money, but I was going to send something else. I opened a new email draft and attached the screenshot of the text conversation. I typed in a single email address in the recipient field, but I did not hit send yet. I leaned back and watched the cursor blink. They wanted a show. They wanted drama. Fine. I would give them a performance they would never forget. But first, I had to let Darius dig his grave a little deeper. I picked up my phone and texted Darius back. Me. The bank needs 24 hours to clear a transfer that large. Hold on, I am doing my best. Darius, hurry, Sophia. He is fading. I laughed, a cold, dry sound in the empty room. Fading. The only thing fading was his future. And he didn't even see it coming. The following Tuesday, I drove to 500 Peachtree Street, not in my Honda and not in my Bentley, but in a nondescript company van marked with the logo of a generic maintenance contractor. This building was the crown jewel of my recent acquisition, a 40-story glass monolith that dominated the Midtown skyline. It was also the building where Darius worked on the 22nd floor. I was not there to see him. I was there because my engineers had flagged a potential issue with the HVAC system in the main lobby, and as the new owner, I wanted to see the structural integrity with my own eyes before I approved a $2 million renovation budget. I wore a neon yellow safety vest, a white hard hat, and carried a heavy-duty clipboard. I had learned long ago that a clipboard and a safety vest were the ultimate cloak of invisibility. You could walk into the Pentagon with a clipboard, and nobody would question you. To the wealthy executives rushing through the lobby, I was part of the furniture less important than the potted plants. I spent 40 minutes inspecting the ventilation shafts behind the reception desk, taking detailed notes on the corrosion I found. I was just finishing up wiping grease from my hands onto a rag when the executive elevator bay dinged. I glanced up instinctively, my heart hammered against my ribs. Darius stepped out. He was walking alongside a man I recognized immediately from my dossier research. Jonathan Sterling, the CEO of TechSoft Solutions. They were laughing about something, Sterling clapping Darius on the back. Darius looked like the picture of corporate success in a navy suit that was tailored within an inch of its life. I turned away, pulling the brim of my hard hat down, hoping to blend into the wall. I just needed to slip through the service corridor door, which was 10 feet away. But luck was not on my side. "Hey, you!" Darius's voice rang out sharp and authoritative. "You with the maintenance crew." I froze. I considered keeping my back turned and walking away, but that would look suspicious. I turned slowly, keeping my head low. "There is a spill near the elevators," Darius barked, snapping his fingers. "Get a mop and clean it up before a client slips. We run a professional ship here." He did not recognize me yet. To him, I was just a uniform. "I am not with the cleaning crew, sir," I said, keeping my voice low and altering my pitch slightly. "I am here for the HVAC inspection." Darius stopped. The color drained from his face. He knew that voice. He stepped closer, squinting at me beneath the hard hat. "Sophia." The word came out as a strangled whisper. He looked around frantically to see if Sterling was watching. The CEO had paused by the security desk, checking his phone. Darius closed the distance between us in 2 long strides. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my bicep with bruising force. "What the hell are you doing here?" he hissed, his eyes bulging with panic. "Are you following me? Are you trying to humiliate me at my job now too?" I tried to pull my arm away, but his grip tightened. "I am working, Darius. I said, calm despite the pain. Let go of me. Working, he spat, looking at my safety vest with revulsion. You are picking up trash in my building. This is exactly what I was talking about. You are a stain, Sophia. I have the CEO right there. If he sees my sister dressed like a construction worker, he will think I come from garbage. He looked around wildly. His eyes landed on a narrow door to our left. A supply closet. Without a word, he shoved me. He threw his entire weight against me, forcing me backward. I stumbled, my boots squeaking on the polished marble. He dragged me toward the closet door, wrenched it open, and pushed me inside. I stumbled over a mop bucket and caught myself against a metal shelving unit, smelling of industrial pine cleaner and damp rags. Stay in here! Darius snarled, his face inches from mine. Do not make a sound. Do not come out until I am gone. If you ruin this for me, Sophia, I swear I will make you regret being born. He slammed the door shut. The lock clicked. I was standing in pitch-black darkness. The only light came from the thin crack beneath the door. My heart was racing, not from fear, but from a cold fury that was beginning to crystallize into something dangerous. He had physically assaulted me. He had locked me in a closet in my own building. I reached for my phone to call security to have him escorted out immediately. But then I heard voices right outside the door. Is everything all right, Darius? It was Sterling. They had not walked away. They were standing right in front of the closet. Darius's voice changed instantly, shifting from the growl of a predator to the smooth, deferential tone of a subordinate. Yes, sir, absolutely. Just had to discipline a member of the maintenance staff. Caught them slacking off on the job. You have to be firm with these people, Sterling. If you give them an inch, they take a mile. I told her to get back to work or get out. I heard Sterling chuckle. A low, rich sound of approval. That is what I like about you, Darius. You have a killer instinct. You do not tolerate mediocrity. That is why I want you leading the negotiations on the lease renewal. I lowered my phone. My thumb hovered over the record button. I pressed it. Thank you, sir, Darius said, sounding preening. I will not let you down. Good, because we have a serious problem, Sterling said, and his tone dropped to something much more grave. The building management just informed us that the property was sold last week. The new ownership group is a firm called SG Holdings. In the dark, I allowed myself a small smile. I have heard of them, Darius said dismissively. Probably just another shell company. I can handle them. I will charm the rep, take them out to a steak dinner, and we will get the rent locked in at the current rate for another 5 years. Sterling sighed, and I heard the sound of him pacing. I do not think you understand, Darius. We ran a background check on SG Holdings. They are not a shell company. They are a shark tank. They have acquired 5 commercial properties in Midtown this quarter, and in every single case, they evicted underperforming tenants and raised the rent by 40%. They value efficiency and profit over relationships. There was a silence. I could imagine Darius loosening his tie. 40%. Darius repeated, his voice wavering slightly. Sir, our margins are already thin this quarter. If the rent goes up that much, we go under. Sterling cut him off. Or at the very least, we have to downsize. And if we downsize, the first thing to go is middle management. The threat hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. I need you to fix this, Darius, Sterling continued. You said you are a negotiator. Prove it. This SG Holdings rep is coming in next Monday. You need to get us a meeting, and you need to convince them that we are an essential asset to this building. If you come back with a rent hike, do not bother coming back at all. Do you understand? Yes, sir, Darius whispered. Loud and clear. Good. Now let's go get lunch. I am starving. I heard their footsteps recede, clicking against the marble floor until they faded into the hum of the lobby. I stood in the dark for a long time, surrounded by mops and brooms. The smell of bleach was strong, but for the first time it didn't smell like work. It smelled like victory. Darius thought he had trapped me in a closet to hide his shame. He didn't realize he had just locked me in a room with the most valuable information of his career. I tapped the stop button on my phone, saving the recording. He had 1 week. 1 week to prepare for a meeting with a shark. I reached for the door handle. It unlocked from the inside, a safety feature he hadn't considered. I pushed the door open and stepped out into the bright lights of the lobby. I dusted off my safety vest and adjusted my hard hat. The receptionist looked at me oddly as I walked past her desk. I pulled out my phone and dialed my assistant. Sarah. I said, my voice echoing slightly in the vast, cavernous space that I owned. Yes, Ms. Green. Schedule a meeting with TechSoft Solutions for next Monday morning. Tell them the chairman of SG Holdings will be attending personally. And Sarah. Yes, ma'am. Make sure the conference room is stocked with plenty of water. I have a feeling the other party is going to be very thirsty. My phone buzzed on Thursday afternoon with a text from my mother that simply read, "Meet us at Ocean Prime at 7, do not be late." It was not a request, it was a summons. Part of me wanted to ignore it to stay in my air-conditioned home office and review the acquisition files for the downtown high-rise. But a morbid curiosity pushed me to go. I wanted to see how far they would go after the hospital stunt and the incident in the janitor closet. I wanted to look them in the eye one last time before I pulled the rug out from under their entire world. I arrived at the seafood restaurant wearing a simple beige cardigan and slacks, looking exactly like the invisible, struggling daughter they expected me to be. They were already seated at a circular booth in the center of the room. The table was groaning under the weight of a seafood tower tiered high with lobster tails, oysters, and jumbo shrimp. A bottle of Dom Perignon sat chilling in a silver bucket. It was a display of wealth that was grotesque, considering I knew for a fact Darius was overdrawn on 3 accounts and my parents were days away from foreclosure. I sat down in the empty chair next to my father. Nobody stood up to greet me. Nobody poured me a glass of wine. "Glad you could make it," Sophia Darius said, cracking a crab leg with violent efficiency. "We ordered for you. Just the house salad. We know you are on a budget." I looked at the feast in front of them. The gluttony was nauseating. "Thank you, Darius," I said quietly, unfolding my napkin. "What is this about?" My father Otis wiped butter from his chin and cleared his throat. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered, but there was a hardness in his gaze that erased any sympathy I might have felt. "We are a family, Sophia." He began, his voice carrying that familiar tone of a lecture. "And families help each other build legacies. Darius has a unique opportunity to expand his business portfolio. A venture capital deal that requires a little bridge financing." I watched Darius smirk as he sipped his champagne. Bridge financing was a fancy word for a bailout. "We need a guarantor, my mother," Patricia said, cutting to the chase. She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a thick document stapled at the corner. She slid it across the white tablecloth, stopping it right in front of my salad plate. "It is just a formality." She continued, waving her hand dismissively. "Darius's credit is tied up in his other successful ventures. We need someone with a clean slate to co-sign." I looked down at the document. It was a high-risk, unsecured personal loan application for $200,000 from a lender I recognized as being predatory. The interest rate was astronomical. "You want me to co-sign a $200,000 loan?" I asked, keeping my voice level. Chloe, who had been busy taking selfies with her lobster, laughed. It was a sharp, brittle sound. "Oh, do not look so terrified, Sophia," she said, rolling her eyes. "It is not like we are asking for your money. We know you do not have any. We just need a signature." She leaned forward, her eyes glittering with malice. "Honestly, you should be thanked that we are even asking you. It helps build your credit history. I am sure your score is sitting somewhere in the basement. Who would lend money to a janitor anyway? But this puts your name next to Darius's. It gives you credibility. You have nothing to lose anyway. If the worst happens, what are they going to take? Your Honda." I felt a cold smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. They thought my credit was trash. They didn't know that my credit score was a perfect 850, or that my signature alone could secure a line of credit in the millions at any major bank in the country. They were trying to use my clean slate to wipe up their mess, thinking it was a worthless rag. I picked up the document and flipped to the terms and conditions. If the borrower defaults, the cosigner is liable for the full amount plus legal fees and accrued interest. I closed the folder and slid it back toward my mother. No. The word hung in the air, heavy and absolute. The clinking of silverware around us seemed to stop. Darius stopped chewing. "Excuse me." I said no. I repeated calmly. "I will not sign this. I will not be responsible for Darius's debts." My mother's face turned a shade of crimson that matched the lobster shells. "You selfish little brat," she hissed, leaning over the table. "After everything we have done for you, we let you sit at this table. We let you eat with us, and you refuse to help your brother secure his future." "His future is not my responsibility, Mom," I said, looking her in the eye. "And neither is his gambling debt or his lifestyle. If he is so successful, let him get the loan himself." Darius slammed his fist on the table, causing the champagne glasses to jump. "You think you are better than us because you hoard your little minimum wage checks?" he shouted, spitting bits of crab meat. "You are nothing. You are a cleaner. A bottom feeder. Sign the damn paper, Sophia." I stood up. I had heard enough. I picked up my purse. "I am leaving," I said. "Enjoy your dinner. I hope you can pay the bill." I turned to walk away, but my mother moved faster than I expected. She scrambled out of the booth and grabbed my arm, spinning me around. "You do not walk away from me when I am talking to you," she screamed. And then she did it. She raised her hand and slapped me across the face. The sound was like a gunshot in the crowded restaurant. A stinging, burning pain radiated across my cheek. The entire restaurant went silent. Waiters froze with trays in midair. Diners turned in their seats, mouths open. My mother stood there, breathing heavily. Her hand still raised, her eyes wide with a mix of rage and sudden realization of where we were. I stood completely still. I could feel the heat rising in my face where her ring had scratched my skin. I tasted a hint of copper in my mouth. For a moment, the only sound was the soft jazz playing over the speakers. I slowly reached up and wiped a smudge of lipstick from my cheek. I looked at my mother, then at my father, who was looking down at his plate, and finally at Darius and Chloe, who looked shocked but not sorry. I did not yell, I did not cry, I did not give them the scene they wanted. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. "You called me ungrateful, Mom," I said, my voice low and steady, carrying through the silent room. "You said you wished you hadn't given birth to me." I tapped the screen, opening my contacts. "Well, you are in luck. Because as of this moment, you didn't." I tapped on Mom. "Block caller." I tapped on Dad. "Block caller." I looked at Darius, who was staring at me with his mouth open. I tapped on Darius. "Block caller." And finally, Chloe. "Block caller." "You wanted me to be invisible," I said, holding the phone up so they could see the screen. "Now I am. Do not call me when the bill comes. Do not call me when the house is taken. And do not call me when you realize exactly who you just struck." I turned around and walked out of the restaurant. My cheek was throbbing, but my heart felt lighter than it had in 20 years. Behind me, I heard the manager approaching their table, his voice stern, asking them to keep it down or leave. I walked into the cool night air and took a deep breath. It was done. The cord was cut. I got into my car and looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The red mark on my cheek was already beginning to bruise. I touched it gently. It was a battle scar. But the war was far from over. In fact, I realized as I started the engine, the real war was just beginning. Monday was coming. And on Monday I wouldn't be Sophia the daughter or Sophia the sister. I would be Ms. Green, the landlord. And eviction notices are served best when the recipient has nowhere left to hide. The silence of a blocked phone is usually a luxury, but that Saturday morning, the silence felt heavy, like the calm before a hurricane. I woke up feeling a strange mix of liberation and dread. I had cut off the digital lifeline to my toxic family, but I knew them too well to believe they would just fade away. They were not the type to accept defeat quietly, especially when they were desperate for money. I poured myself a cup of coffee and walked to the front window of my rental house. It was a modest place in a working-class neighborhood, the kind of street where people mowed their own lawns and knew each other's business. Usually my neighbors were friendly, offering a wave or a smile, but as I looked out through the blinds, I saw Mrs. Higgins from across the street staring at my house. She was standing by her mailbox holding her phone, and when she saw the blinds move, she didn't wave. She scowled and shook her head, spitting on the ground before turning away. A cold knot formed in my stomach. Mrs. Higgins had known me for 3 years. She had once baked me a pie when I had the flu. I unlocked my phone and ignored the text messages, but opened the Nextdoor app, the digital town square where gossip traveled faster than light. The first post at the top of the feed made my blood freeze. It was a repost of a TikTok video. The thumbnail showed Chloe, her face blotchy and tear-streaked, looking directly into the camera with big, pleading eyes. The caption read, "Heartbroken. How can family be so cruel? Please share." I pressed play. "Hey guys." Chloe's voice cracked theatrically. "I do not usually do this. I try to keep my life positive, but I do not know where else to turn. My father-in-law. My sweet dad, Otis, is fighting for his life." She wiped away a tear that looked suspiciously like a drop of saline solution. "We are doing everything we can. My husband is working 3 jobs. We sold our car. We are selling everything, but the surgery is expensive. And the hardest part isn't the money, it is the betrayal." The camera zoomed in on her face. "My husband's sister, Sophia. She lives right here in town. She has no kids, no expenses. We asked her for help. Not even for money, just to sign a paper so we could get a loan to save Dad's life. And do you know what she did? She laughed at us. She blocked our numbers. She told us to let him die because it would save her an inheritance tax." My hand shook as I held the phone. It was a lie so vile, so perfectly crafted to trigger outrage, that it took my breath away. She had painted me not just as unhelpful, but as a monster. I scrolled down to the comments. There were hundreds of them. "Identify her. Let's make her famous. I think I know who this is. Does she drive a beat-up Honda? She works as a janitor downtown, right? Imagine being that poor in spirit. Someone should teach her a lesson about respecting elders." The video had 40,000 likes. In a matter of hours, Chloe had weaponized the internet against me. She had turned my community, my sanctuary, into a hunting ground. I heard a thud against my front door. I jumped, dropping my phone on the counter. I walked to the door and opened it slowly. A bag of trash had been thrown against the porch. It had split open, spilling coffee grounds and rotten banana peels across my welcome mat. Nestled in the garbage was a piece of cardboard with a message scrawled in black marker. "Call your mother, you monster." I stood there staring at the mess. This was not just online bullying anymore. This was real. This was dangerous. They were inciting violence against me because I refused to be their bank account. My phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize. I knew I shouldn't answer. I knew it was part of the game. But I needed to know the rules of engagement. "Hello," I answered, my voice cold. "Did you see the views, Sophia?" It was Darius. His voice was smug, dripping with the satisfaction of a petty tyrant who thinks he has found a nuclear button. "I see you are letting your wife do your dirty work," I said, stepping back inside and locking the deadbolt. "Tell me, Darius, does she know that while she is crying on the internet for money for Dad, you are planning a trip to Cabo with a woman named Candy?" There was a pause, a sharp intake of breath on the other end. But Darius recovered quickly. "Nobody cares about that, Sophia. Nobody cares about the truth. They care about the story. And right now the story is that you are an abuser." He laughed low and dark. "You like your job, right? You like scrubbing those floors. I bet your employer would hate to know they have a woman who abuses the elderly on their payroll." I know people, Sophia. One phone call and I can have you fired. I can make you unemployable. You will be begging for change on the corner unless you unblock Mom and sign that loan application by noon. You are threatening my job, I asked, letting him dig the hole deeper. I am threatening your life, Sophia, he spat. You think you are safe because you hid your money, but you cannot hide your reputation. Send the 50,000 or sign the loan. Those are your options. Tick-tock, little sister. The line went dead. I stood in my kitchen listening to the hum of the refrigerator. He threatened to have me fired. He threatened to call the owner of the building where I worked. He was going to call me to fire me. The absurdity of it would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. My phone rang again. This time the caller ID displayed a name that brought my pulse back to a steady rhythm. Sarah, my executive assistant. I answered immediately. Yes, Sarah. Ms. Green. Sarah's voice was crisp, professional, and laced with a hint of controlled aggression. Our brand monitoring software flagged a viral video originating from an account linked to a Chloe Wilson. It has high velocity within the Atlanta metro area. I know, I said, walking over to the window to look at the trash on my porch. I have seen it, Sarah continued. Our legal team has reviewed the content. It constitutes clear defamation, harassment, and incitement to violence. We have also traced the IP address of the upload to a device registered to the shared family plan you pay for. She paused, the sound of typing in the background. Ms. Green, we can shut this down immediately. The legal team has drafted a cease and desist order that will freeze their assets. Furthermore, I have a contact at the platform's hosting service. We can have the account suspended for violating terms of service regarding harassment, or if you prefer, we can acquire the rights to the content through a third-party shell and delete it permanently. We can bury this so deep that even the Wayback Machine won't find it. Do you want me to execute the takedown? I looked at the trash on my porch. I thought about the fear in my neighbor's eyes. I thought about Darius's smug voice telling me tick-tock. If I deleted the video now, they would claim censorship. They would play the victim even harder. They would say I used my dark money to silence the truth. No, Sarah, I said, my voice turning to steel. No, Sarah asked, surprised. Leave it up, I said. In fact, I want you to archive it. Download every comment, every share, every threat. Save it all. But Ms. Green, it is damaging your reputation in the neighborhood, Sarah argued gently. It is damaging the reputation of a janitor named Sophia, I corrected her. It is not damaging Sophia Green, the CEO. Not yet. I watched Mrs. Higgins across the street, taking a photo of my trash-covered porch, probably to post it on Facebook. Let them have their moment, Sarah. Let them think they are winning. Let the balloon expand until it is so big that when we pop it, the sound shatters their entire world. I understand, Sarah said. And the meeting on Monday? Keep it on the schedule, I said. And Sarah, make sure the video is queued up on the presentation screen in the conference room. I want that to be the first thing Darius sees when he walks in to beg for his job. Understood. Have a good weekend, Ms. Green. I hung up. I walked to the closet and pulled out a trash bag. I went outside and started cleaning up the garbage on my porch. I didn't look at the neighbors. I didn't look at the cars slowing down to gawk. I cleaned in silence. Because that is what janitors do. We clean up the mess. And on Monday, I was going to clean up the biggest mess of all. Monday morning arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. While I was in my office overlooking the city reviewing quarterly reports, Darius was 20 floors below in his glass-walled cubicle, staring at the death warrant of his career. I had access to the read receipts on the email server, so I knew exactly the moment he opened the attachment. It was 9:02 a.m. The email was sent from the General Counsel of SG Holdings. The subject line was Lease Renewal Terms and Conditions. The content was brief and brutal. Due to market adjustments and building upgrades, the base rent for TechSoft Solutions would be increasing from $12,000 a month to $36,000 a month, effective immediately upon lease renewal. I imagined the blood draining from Darius's face. He had promised his boss Sterling that he would handle the new owners. He had bragged that he could charm them into a discount. Instead, he was staring at a 300% increase. If he took this number to Sterling, he wouldn't just be fired, he would be laughed out of the industry. Darius did exactly what I expected him to do. He panicked. He started typing furiously. I could see the emails coming into the dedicated inbox I had set up for Chairman Green. Subject: urgent meeting request regarding lease. Dear Chairman Green, my name is Darius Wilson, and I represent TechSoft. I believe there has been a clerical error regarding our new rental rates. We are a pillar of this building, and I am sure we can come to a mutually beneficial arrangement. I am a man who understands the value of partnership. Please allow me to treat you to dinner so we can discuss this man to man. I let the email sit unread. 10 minutes later, another one arrived. Subject: please read. Urgent. Chairman Green. I have been trying to reach your office. My CEO is very eager to finalize this deal. I am personally authorized to offer you incentives. I am sure we can find common ground. I am a well-connected executive in this city, and I would love to introduce you to my network. I took a sip of my tea and watched the desperation mount. He was sweating. I could feel it through the screen. He was realizing that his charm, which usually worked on his mother and his wife, had absolutely no currency in the real world of high-stakes real estate. By noon, he was frantic. He needed leverage. He needed cash. He needed to look like a player to impress this mysterious Chairman Green. If he couldn't get a meeting through email, he probably planned to bribe his way past the secretary or buy an expensive gift to show he meant business. But Darius was broke. His bank accounts were overdrawn, and he had maxed out his credit cards on the trip to Cabo he was planning with his mistress. That afternoon, my phone alerted me that the alarm system at my parents' condo had been disarmed. It was a silent notification I received because I was the one who paid for their security system, another bill they thought just magically disappeared every month. I checked the camera feed from the living room. Darius walked in. He looked disheveled. His tie was loosened and he was pacing the living room, checking the windows. He called out for Mom and Dad. No answer. They were likely at the pharmacy picking up prescriptions or at the grocery store using coupons. Darius walked into the master bedroom. The camera angle there was wide. I watched as my brother, the regional sales director, knelt down in front of my mother's dresser. He opened the bottom drawer and pulled out a small velvet box. I knew what was inside. It was Grandma's diamond tennis bracelet. It was the only thing of real value my mother owned, an heirloom she had promised to give to Chloe one day, much to my indifference. It was worth maybe $5,000 at a pawn shop, enough to grease some palms or buy a very expensive bottle of scotch for a bribe. Darius opened the box, checked the diamonds, and shoved it into his pocket. Then he did something that made my blood boil. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Hey, Mom?" he said, his voice shifting instantly into a tone of concern. "Where are you guys?" "Okay, good, stay there. Listen, I just stopped by the condo to check on you, and I saw something weird. Sophia's car was parked down the street." "The Honda?" "Yeah, she was just sitting there watching the building." "I don't know, Mom, she looked unstable. I just wanted to warn you. You might want to check your valuables when you get home. You know how desperate she is for money right now." He hung up. He was framing me. He was stealing from his own mother to save his career, and he was using me as the scapegoat to cover his tracks. It fit perfectly with the narrative Chloe had spun on TikTok. The jealous, broke daughter coming back to rob the parents she had abandoned. I turned off the monitor. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the sheer audacity of his evil. He had crossed a line that I didn't even know existed. I picked up my phone and called Sarah, my assistant. "It is time," I said. "Send the response," Sarah asked. "Send it. And add the special instruction." 5 minutes later, Darius was sitting in his car outside a pawn shop on Ponce de Leon Avenue, clutching the stolen bracelet when his phone pinged. He checked his email. From Executive Office of SG Holdings. To Darius Wilson. Subject: meeting confirmation. Darius froze. I could imagine the hope flaring in his chest. He opened the email. "Dear Mr. Wilson, Chairman Green has reviewed your correspondence. He appreciates your persistence and your desire to discuss the value of partnership. He is willing to meet with you to discuss the terms of the lease and your counteroffer. The meeting is scheduled for Monday at 9 a.m. sharp in the penthouse conference room. However, the chairman has a specific request. He believes that a man's success is built upon the foundation of his family. He has researched your background and is impressed by the public image of the Wilson family. He wishes to meet the people behind your success. Please bring your wife and your parents to the meeting. The chairman wants to look the entire family in the eye before he signs any deal. Failure to bring them will result in the immediate termination of your lease. I could practically see Darius smiling. He thought he had won. He thought Chairman Green was a traditionalist, a family man, who would be impressed by the facade of the loving Wilson clan. He didn't know he was being asked to bring witnesses to his own execution. He immediately called Mom. "Mom, forget about Sophia," he said, his voice filled with fake excitement. "I have huge news. I just landed a meeting with the billionaire owner of my building. He wants to meet you. Yes, you and Dad and Chloe. He wants to meet the family." "This is it, Mom. This is the big break. Wear your best Sunday clothes. We are going to the top." He didn't mention the bracelet. He didn't mention the rent hike. He just sold them another dream. I sat back in my chair and looked at the city skyline. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over Atlanta. Monday was going to be a bloodbath. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't dreading a family gathering. I was counting down the minutes. The weekend leading up to the meeting was a masterclass in delusion. I did not have to guess what Darius and Chloe were doing because their spending habits were as loud as their personalities. My banking alerts, which I still had linked to Darius's secondary accounts for monitoring purposes, were pinging incessantly. He was at Lenox Square Mall, specifically at the Gucci and Armani boutiques. He was buying a new suit for himself and a dress for Chloe to wear to the meeting with Chairman Green. I watched the transaction amounts roll in. $3,000, $2,000, $500 for a tie. He was maxing out every credit card he had, pushing them into overdraft, counting on a bonus that did not exist from a deal he had not yet signed. He was betting the farm on a harvest that was already rotting in the field. While they were burning money they did not have, I was at home preparing for war. My living room was transformed into a command center. I had the lease agreements spread out on the coffee table, highlighted and tagged. I had the forensic accounting reports on Darius's embezzlement printed and bound. I was ready, but they were not done trying to break me. At 2 in the afternoon on Saturday, a heavy pounding on my front door interrupted my review of the city's zoning laws. I walked to the door and checked the peephole. 2 uniformed police officers stood on my porch. One of them had his hand resting near his holster. I opened the door, calm and composed. "Can I help you, officers?" The taller officer stepped forward, his face stern. "Are you Sophia Wilson?" "I am Sophia Green." I corrected him using my legal name, which I had changed years ago, a detail my family often conveniently forgot. "We have a report of a theft at the residence of Otis and Patricia Wilson," the officer said. "A diamond tennis bracelet was reported stolen yesterday. Mr. Darius Wilson stated he saw you at the scene and that you have been harassing the family for money. We need you to come down to the station for questioning." I stared at them. Darius had actually done it. He had filed a false police report to cover his own theft and to get me arrested right before the big meeting. He wanted me in a jail cell on Monday morning so I couldn't ruin his moment. I did not get angry. I did not raise my voice. I simply stepped back and opened the door wider. "Officers, I am currently in the middle of a video conference call," I said, gesturing toward my dining room table where my laptop was open. "I am speaking with Councilman Davis and the zoning board regarding a redevelopment project in Midtown. I would appreciate it if you could verify the timestamp of my login. I have been on this call since 8 a.m. The officers exchanged a look. They walked into my house expecting to see a janitor's hovel filled with stolen goods. Instead, they saw a minimalist high-end interior. They saw the architectural blueprints spread out on the table. They saw the face of Councilman Davis on my laptop screen, waiting patiently. "Ms. Green, is everything all right?" the councilman asked, his voice booming through the speakers. Just a misunderstanding, councilman, I said, smiling at the camera. 2 officers are here responding to a false report. The taller officer looked at the screen, then at me, and then at the expensive blueprints. He realized instantly that something didn't add up. A woman discussing million-dollar zoning permits with city officials does not break into condos to steal used jewelry. He cleared his throat, his demeanor shifting from aggressive to embarrassed. I apologize for the interruption, Ms. Green, he said, backing away. It seems we may have been given incomplete information. We will verify your alibi with the digital logs. Sorry to disturb you. They left quickly, closing the door softly behind them. They knew they had been used as pawns in a family dispute, and they didn't want to be anywhere near the fallout. I sat back down and unmuted my microphone. My apologies, Councilman. As I was saying regarding the waste management protocols for the new site, I worked through the rest of the weekend feeling a cold detachment settle over me. I was not Sophia the victim anymore. I was the executioner sharpening the blade. On Sunday night, my phone lit up with a text message. It was from Chloe. She had unblocked me just to send this taunt. Hey, loser! Just wanted to let you know that tomorrow is the big day. Darius is meeting with a billionaire. A real one, not like the fake life you pretend to have. We are all going. Mom and Dad are so proud. Darius is going to be the CEO of his own division soon. A second text followed immediately. You should probably start looking for a new job. Once Darius owns that building, he is going to make sure the cleaning staff is upgraded. No offense. Prepare yourself to watch him shine while you stay in the dirt where you belong. I read the text twice. The arrogance was breathtaking. She was mocking the person who held her husband's fate in her hands. She was bragging about a meeting that was a trap she was walking right into. I could have ignored it. I could have let the silence be my answer. But the temptation was too sweet. I typed a reply. 2 words. Simple, deadly. See you there. I hit send. Almost immediately, 3 laughing face emojis popped up on my screen. Chloe. In your dreams, psycho. Security won't even let you in the lobby unless you have a mop in your hand. Seek help. Eek. She thought I was delusional. She thought I was crashing the meeting. She had absolutely no idea that the security she was relying on reported directly to me. I put my phone down and walked to my closet. I pushed aside the gray hoodies and the worn-out jeans I wore around them. I reached into the back and pulled out the garment bag I had prepared for Monday. Inside was a bespoke white power suit, sharp, immaculate, powerful. I ran my hand over the fabric. Tomorrow they would see me, not the sister they bullied, not the daughter they neglected, not the janitor they mocked. Tomorrow they would see the owner, and I would make sure the view was unforgettable. Monday morning arrived with a sky so blue it felt almost artificial, a perfect backdrop for the theater of the absurd that was about to unfold. I stood across the street from the SG Tower, sipping a matcha latte, watching the entrance like a hawk. My building rose 50 stories into the air, a monolith of steel and glass that reflected the city's ambition. It was the kind of place that intimidated people just by existing. You had to crane your neck to see the top, and even then, the sun usually blinded you. At 8:45 exactly, a black stretch limousine pulled up to the curb. It was excessive, of course. A standard town car would have been professional, but Darius never did professional when he could do performative. I watched as the driver opened the door and my family spilled out onto the sidewalk like actors in a reality show nobody watched. Darius emerged first. He was wearing the Italian suit I knew he had purchased on credit over the weekend. It was a shade of blue that was just a little too bright, screaming for attention rather than commanding respect. He adjusted his cufflinks, took a deep breath of the exhaust-filled air, and slicked back his hair. He looked like a man who believed he had already won the lottery. Next came Chloe. She was dressed for a cocktail party, not a corporate negotiation. Her dress was tight red and completely inappropriate for 9 a.m. She was clinging to Darius's arm, her eyes scanning the street to see if anyone was looking at her. She wanted to be envied. She wanted the passers-by to wonder who the power couple was. Finally, my parents stepped out. My mother, Patricia, was wearing her Sunday church hat and a suit that smelled of mothballs and desperation. My father, Otis, looked uncomfortable in a tie that was too tight, clutching a briefcase that I knew contained absolutely nothing of value. They looked nervous, huddled together like sheep, hoping the shepherd knew where the green grass was. I finished my latte, tossed the cup in a recycling bin, and adjusted my sunglasses. I was wearing a white bespoke suit tailored to perfection with not a single wrinkle or loose thread. My hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. I didn't look like Sophia the daughter. I didn't look like Sophia the janitor. I looked like money. I timed my entrance perfectly. I waited until they were pushing through the revolving doors, arguing about who should walk in front, before I stepped into the slipstream behind them. The lobby of the SG Tower was a cavernous space of polished marble and abstract art. The air was cool and smelled of expensive sanitizer and white tea. My family stood in the center of the atrium, looking up at the directory board. "Look at that," Darius said, pointing to the top line. "SG Holdings. Chairman Green. That is the man. That is the man who is going to change our lives." My mother squinted at the board. "Green? Is he related to the Greens from the country club?" "No, Mom." Darius scoffed. "He is a billionaire. He is probably some old oil tycoon or a tech genius. It does not matter who he is. What matters is that in an hour, we are going to be his best friends." They were so busy fantasizing about spending money, they didn't hear the click of my heels approaching them on the marble floor. I stopped 10 feet away from them and folded my arms. "Good morning," I said. The sound of my voice made them jump as if a ghost had whispered in their ears. They spun around in unison. For a second, there was silence. They looked at the white suit. They looked at the sunglasses. They looked at the confidence radiating off me. But their brains could not process what they were seeing. They could not reconcile the image of the successful woman standing before them with the narrative they had built of the pathetic scrubbing failure. So instead of seeing the truth, they invented a new lie. My mother was the first to speak, her face twisted into a sneer of pure disgust. "Sophia? What on earth are you doing here, and why are you dressed like that?" I took off my sunglasses, slowly revealing eyes that held zero warmth. "I work here, Mom." Darius burst out laughing. It was a loud, nervous sound that echoed uncomfortably in the quiet lobby. "You work here," he mocked. "Oh, let me guess. The cleaning crew got new uniforms? Or did you sneak in here to beg for a job? Look at you. You look like you are wearing a costume. Who are you trying to be?" "Hillary Clinton," Chloe chimed in, stepping forward to look me up and down with jealous eyes. "Did you steal that suit, Sophia? Because we all know you can't afford it. Did you take it from a dry cleaner's you work at? You need to leave. Right now." "I am not leaving," I said, my voice steady. "I have a meeting at 9 o'clock, just like you." My father, who had been quiet until now, stepped forward. His face was red with embarrassment. "Sophia, stop this nonsense. We are here to meet with the owner of this building, the chairman. We cannot have you hanging around the lobby looking like a stalker." "A stalker," I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, a stalker," my mother hissed. "You followed us here, didn't you? You saw Darius's success. You saw that we were finally moving up in the world and you couldn't stand it. You had to come here and ruin it. Well, I won't let you." She looked around frantically, hoping security would notice us. "You are an embarrassment, Sophia. Go back to your mop bucket. Go back to your Honda. Just get out of my sight before Mr. Green comes down and sees that we are related to the help." The irony was so thick I could taste it. They were worried about being associated with the help, not realizing that without the help, they wouldn't even be allowed in the building. I checked my watch. It was 8:55. "I do not have time for this," I said. I walked past them toward the executive elevator bank. "Hey, Darius," shouted, chasing after me. "Where do you think you are going?" "That is the executive elevator. The service elevator is around the back near the dumpster. That is where you belong." I ignored him and pressed the call button. The light glowed a soft amber. Darius grabbed my shoulder. "I am talking to you. Do not make me call security. I am a VIP guest of the owner. You are trespassing. If you get in that elevator with us, I will personally throw you out." The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. I stepped inside. I turned around to face them. They stood there hesitant, unsure if they should follow me or wait for the next car to avoid the contamination of my presence. "Get out," Chloe snapped. "We are not riding with you." "Then take the stairs," I said, reaching for the button to close the doors. "Fine," Darius growled, pushing past me into the elevator. "We will ride with you, but do not speak to us, and do not look at us. When we get to the top floor, you stay in the elevator and go back down. I do not want Chairman Green to see your face." The rest of the family piled in, squeezing into the corners to get as far away from me as possible. The air in the elevator was thick with their cheap perfume and heavy anxiety. As the doors began to slide shut, a large man in a dark suit appeared in the lobby. It was Mr. Henderson, the head of building security. He was a former Marine, 6'4", a man who didn't smile for anyone. He saw the elevator doors closing. He saw me standing in the center. He stopped walking. He snapped his heels together. And then, with perfect military precision, he bowed his head. "Good morning, ma'am," he said, his deep voice carrying clearly into the car. The doors clicked shut, sealing us in. For a moment there was total silence as the elevator began its smooth ascent. Then Darius let out a breath he had been holding. He adjusted his tie, puffing out his chest like a peacock. "Did you see that?" he asked, looking at Mom and Dad with gleaming eyes. "Did you see the head of security?" My mother clasped her hands together. "I did." He bowed. He actually bowed. "That is the power of reputation," Darius said, shooting a smug look at me. "He knows who I am. He knows I am here to see Chairman Green. That is how you treat a VIP. He respects the suit. He respects the man." Chloe giggled, clinging to his arm. "You are so important, honey. Even the guards know it." I stood there staring straight ahead at the digital numbers climbing higher and higher. 20, 30, 40. They actually thought the guard was bowing to Darius. They thought a man who guarded billionaires was impressed by a regional sales director in a leased suit. The delusion was absolute. I let a small, cold smile play on my lips, hidden from their view. Enjoy the ride, I thought to myself, because gravity works differently at the top. The higher you go, the harder you fall. And we were about to hit the ceiling. Ding! Floor 50, the penthouse. The doors opened. "After you," I said, gesturing to the open hallway. Darius sneered at me one last time. "Stay here, Sophia. Do not follow us." He stepped out, leading his family toward the double mahogany doors at the end of the hall. He walked with the swagger of a king, unaware that he was walking directly to the guillotine. I waited until they turned the corner. Then I stepped out of the elevator. I didn't go to the waiting room. I took the side entrance, the one that led directly into the private office, connected to the conference room. It was time to put on the final piece of my costume. It was time to become Chairman Green. The elevator door slid open to the 50th floor, and the atmosphere changed instantly. Down in the lobby, the air had been filled with the chaotic energy of the city, but up here the air was rarefied and silent. The carpet was so thick it swallowed the sound of our footsteps, and the walls were lined with original modern art that cost more than the entire gross domestic product of some small countries. Darius stepped out first, adjusting his jacket with a nervous twitch. He walked straight to the reception desk, which was a sleek slab of black marble, manned by a woman with glasses who looked like she held the nuclear codes. "Darius Wilson, here to see Chairman Green," he announced, leaning his elbow on the desk in a pose he probably thought looked charming, but actually looked desperate. I believe I am expected. We are here to discuss the future of TechSoft. Big things happening. The receptionist Sarah, who had been my loyal executive assistant for 5 years, did not even blink. She typed something on her keyboard, her face a mask of professional indifference. "Please take a seat. Mr. Wilson," she said without looking up. "The chairman is finishing a call with Tokyo. He will be with you shortly." Darius tapped the desk, his fingers leaving a smudge on the polished stone. "Right. Tokyo. Busy man. I understand. I am a busy man myself. Time is money, as they say." He turned away and gestured for Mom and Dad to sit on the plush leather sofas. Chloe, however, was not interested in sitting. She had her phone out and was panning it around the room, capturing the panoramic view of the Atlanta skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Hey guys," she whispered loudly into her phone. "You are not going to believe where I am. The penthouse of the SG Tower, just waiting for a meeting with a billionaire. No big deal. Just another Monday for the Wilsons." She walked over to a sculpture in the corner, a twisted piece of bronze, and posed next to it, making a duck face. "Make sure you hit those likes," she said to her screen. "We are leveling up today." I had slipped out of the side entrance moments before they arrived and positioned myself in a high-backed armchair in the far corner of the waiting room. I was hidden behind a large, potted fiddle-leaf fig tree, holding a copy of this month's Forbes magazine. I watched them through the leaves. It was like watching a nature documentary about invasive species. They were loud, they were tacky, and they had absolutely no respect for the space they were invading. Darius was pacing back and forth, rehearsing his pitch under his breath. "Synergy," he muttered. "We bring synergy to the building. We are a legacy tenant. Essential." He turned his pivot, and that was when he saw me. I lowered the magazine just an inch, just enough for our eyes to meet. Darius froze mid-step. His jaw dropped. He looked back at the elevator, then back at me. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, his face contorted with a mixture of shock and fury. "What the hell are you doing here?" he hissed, his voice a low, venomous growl. I calmly turned the page of the magazine. On the cover was a silhouette of a woman standing on top of a skyscraper with the headline, "The Silent Titan: How Sophia Green Built an Empire in the Shadows." "I am reading Darius," I said without looking up. "It is a very interesting article. You should read it. You might learn something about business." He snatched the magazine out of my hands and threw it onto the floor. "I told you to stay downstairs," he said, his hands shaking. "How did you get up here? Did you sneak past security? If you ruin this for me, Sophia, I swear I will kill you." Mom and Dad hurried over, looking terrified. "Sophia, please," my mother begged, clutching her purse. "Just leave. Go hide in the bathroom. Do not let Mr. Green see you. You are going to embarrass us." I picked up the magazine from the floor and dusted it off. "I have every right to be here, Mom," I said, looking her in the eye. "Maybe the chairman wants to hear my side of the story." Darius laughed, a short, cruel sound. "Your side of the story. Nobody cares about your story. You are a janitor. You are nothing. Now get up and get out before I drag you out." I did not move. I crossed my legs and looked at him with a level gaze that usually made board members nervous. "Make me," I said. Darius looked at the receptionist, Sarah, who was busy on the phone. He thought she wasn't watching. He stepped closer, pretending to lean in to whisper, but instead he drove the toe of his expensive Italian shoe hard into my shin. Pain shot up my leg, sharp and blinding. It took everything in me not to cry out. I gripped the armrests of the chair, my knuckles turning white. "I said move," he whispered through gritted teeth. "That was a warning. The next one goes into your ribs. Do you want to be limping when security throws you out?" I looked at him. I looked at the sweat beading on his forehead. I looked at the pure, unadulterated malice in his eyes. He had just assaulted his sister in a corporate waiting room to protect a lie. That was the moment the last tiny ember of familial love I had been holding on to finally died. It turned into cold gray ash. "You made a mistake, Darius," I said softly. He pulled his leg back to kick me again, but suddenly the phone on Sarah's desk buzzed. Sarah stood up. She looked at our group, her eyes lingering on me for a fraction of a second, with a look of profound respect, before she turned her icy gaze to Darius. "Mr. Wilson," she said, her voice clear and commanding, "the chairman will see you now." Darius straightened up instantly. He adjusted his tie and smoothed his hair, flashing a fake smile that looked like a rictus of terror. "Excellent," he said. "Come on, everyone. Showtime." He looked down at me one last time. "Stay here," he commanded. "If I see your face in that room, I will tell him you are a mentally unstable stalker. Do not test me." He turned toward the massive double mahogany doors that led to the boardroom. Chloe was right behind him, checking her makeup in her phone camera one last time. Mom and Dad followed, looking like they were walking to the gallows. I stood up. My leg throbbed, but I stood tall. I walked right behind them. Darius heard my footsteps. He spun around right as he reached the door handle. "I said, stay," he snarled. He didn't just block me, he shoved me. He put both hands on my shoulders and pushed me backward with force. I stumbled, my heels catching on the thick carpet, and I fell hard onto my hands and knees. Darius didn't even look back to see if I was hurt. He opened the double doors and strode into the room, arms wide open, ready to embrace his destiny. "Chairman Green," he boomed, his voice full of false confidence. "It is an honor to finally meet you. I brought my family just as you asked." I pushed myself up from the floor. My palms were stinging from the carpet burn. I brushed off my white suit. I took a deep breath. I walked through the open doors behind them. The boardroom was massive, a long table of polished black wood that seemed to stretch on forever. The walls were glass, revealing the entire city below us. At the far end of the table sat a single high-backed leather chair. It was turned away from the door facing the window. Darius stopped halfway down the table. He looked confused. "Mr. Green?" he asked tentatively. The chair did not move. Chloe lowered her phone. "Is he asleep?" she whispered. My mother grabbed my father's arm. "Maybe he is waiting for us to sit down." I walked past my family. I walked past Darius, who reached out to grab me but missed. "Sophia, stop!" Darius hissed. "What are you doing? Get back here." I ignored him. I walked steadily down the length of the long black table. The sound of my heels clicking on the floor was the only sound in the room. I reached the head of the table. I stood next to the chair. Darius looked like he was about to have a stroke. "Get away from the chairman," he shouted, running toward me. "You are going to get us all arrested." I placed my hand on the back of the leather chair. I looked at Darius. I looked at the fear and the greed and the arrogance that defined him. "There is no one in the chair, Darius," I said. He stopped 10 feet away, panting. "What?" he asked. I spun the chair around. It was empty. Darius blinked. He looked at the empty chair, then at me, then around the room. "Where is he?" he asked, his voice rising in panic. "Is this a joke? Where is Chairman Green?" I walked around the chair. I smoothed the leather seat, and then, with the slow, deliberate grace of a queen taking her throne, I sat down. I rested my elbows on the armrests and steepled my fingers. "Hello, Darius," I said. "You wanted to meet the owner." I leaned forward and the room seemed to shrink around us. "You are looking at her." Darius was in the middle of the performance of his life. He was pacing back and forth in front of the massive black desk, gesturing wildly with his hands as he addressed the high back of the leather chair. He had clearly decided that the chairman was eccentric and preferred to listen without facing him, or perhaps he thought the chairman was simply testing his resolve. Either way, Darius was not going to let a little thing like a turned chair stop him from begging for his career. "So you see, Chairman Green," he said, his voice trembling with a mixture of nerves and bravado, "TechSoft is not just a company, we are a family, and I know you value family. That is why I brought mine here today. My father a retired veteran, my mother a pillar of the community, my wife a dedicated partner. We represent the kind of stability you want in this building. We are the bedrock. And frankly, raising the rent would not just hurt a business, it would hurt a legacy. He paused for dramatic effect, wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead. I know we can come to an agreement, sir. I know you are a man of reason. If you just turn around and look me in the eye, you will see a man you can trust. A man who shares your values. I sat there listening to every word. I listened to him lie about his stability. I listened to him exploit our parents as props. I listened to him talk about values he had never possessed in his life. The room was silent, waiting for the chairman to respond. I took a deep breath. I placed my hands on the armrests, and then with a slow, deliberate motion, I pushed off the desk. The heavy leather chair spun around. The movement was smooth and silent, but the effect was like a bomb going off in the room. I sat there, legs crossed, hands steepled under my chin, staring directly into Darius's eyes. "Hello, Darius," I said calmly. For a solid 3 seconds, nobody moved. It was as if time had fractured. Their brains were trying to process the visual information, but the neural pathways simply didn't exist. They were expecting an old white man. They were expecting a stranger. Instead, they were looking at the sister they had called a failure sitting in the seat of absolute power. Then gravity seemed to return to the room all at once. Chloe gasped a sharp, strangled sound. Her hand flew to her mouth, and the iPhone she had been using to record the moment slipped from her manicured fingers. It hit the glass table with a loud crack, shattering the screen, but she didn't even look down. Her eyes were bulging out of her head. My mother let out a low moan and collapsed back onto the sofa, clutching her chest for real this time. My father's jaw literally dropped, his mouth hanging open in a perfect circle of disbelief. But it was Darius who reacted the most violently. His face went from a professional smile to a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. He didn't see a CEO. He saw a nuisance. He saw his little sister playing a prank at the worst possible moment. "Are you insane?" he screamed, his voice cracking. He lunged forward, slamming his hands onto the desk. "Get out of that chair! Have you lost your mind? The chairman could be back any second. If he sees you sitting there dirtying his furniture, he will have us all arrested." I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I just watched him unravel. "You are ruining everything," Darius yelled, spitting as he spoke. "You followed us in here. You snuck in while we were talking. Get up, Sophia. Get up right now and go hide under the table or something." He reached out to grab my arm to physically drag me out of the seat. "Do not touch me," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it had a tone they had never heard before. It was the tone I used to close million-dollar mergers. It was the tone of authority. Darius froze, his hand hovering inches from my suit jacket. You think this is funny?" he stammered, stepping back. "You think this is a game? This is my life, Sophia. This is my career." He turned to his wife, looking for backup. "Chloe, help me get her out of here. She is having a psychotic break. She thinks she belongs here." Chloe took a step forward, her face pale. She looked at me, then at the empty office behind me, then back at me. She was trying to rationalize the impossible. "Sophia," she said, her voice trembling. Did you get a job here? Is that it? Are you the secretary?" She let out a nervous, hysterical laugh. "Oh my God. That is it, isn't it? You are the assistant. You were dusting the chair and you decided to sit down to trick us. That is why you are wearing that suit. It is the uniform." Okay, joke is over. Very funny. Now please tell us where Mr. Green is. We are late." I looked at Chloe. Even when faced with the truth, she tried to shove me back into a box she could understand. A box where I was subservient. A box where I was beneath her. I picked up the thick blue folder sitting on the desk in front of me. It was the file Darius had sent over, the file containing his desperate pleas, his fraudulent financials, and his pathetic counteroffer. "I am not the secretary, Chloe," I said. I tossed the file onto the table. It slid across the polished surface and stopped right at the edge directly in front of Darius's waist. The cover of the file read, TechSoft Lease Renewal, prepared for Chairman S. Green. Darius looked down at the file. He looked at the initial, S. Green. He looked back up at me. His eyes were darting back and forth, searching for a way out, searching for the punchline. But, no, he whispered. That is impossible. You are a janitor. I saw you. I saw you in the closet. You scrub toilets. You drive a Honda. He was pleading with the universe to make sense. You cannot be him, Darius said, pointing a shaking finger at me. You cannot be the chairman. I stood up. I rose slowly, smoothing out the lapels of my white bespoke suit. I walked around the desk and stood right in front of him. I was shorter than him, but in that moment, I towered over him. I leaned in close, so close I could smell the fear on him. I looked him dead in the eye. Owner, I said. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Owner, not sister, not daughter, not janitor. Owner. I watched the blood drain from Darius's face. It started at his forehead and washed down to his neck, leaving him a sickly shade of gray. His knees actually buckled, and he had to grab the edge of the table to steady himself. The silence in the room was absolute. The only sound was the low, steady hum of the air conditioning unit circulating the air that I paid for in the building that I owned, cooling the sweat on the brow of the brother who had mocked me. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. He looked at the file. He looked at the chair. He looked at me. And finally, for the first time in his life, Darius saw me, and he was terrified. For a moment, Darius looked like he was going to vomit right there on the expensive Persian rug. His brain was desperately trying to reject the reality standing in front of him, but the truth was a stubborn thing. He blinked rapidly, and then a strange, twisted smile began to form on his face. It was the smile of a man who had decided that if he denied reality hard enough, it might just go away. Very funny, Sophia, he said, letting out a dry, hacking laugh that sounded like dry leaves being crushed. You almost had me there for a second. The suit, the chair, the dramatic entrance. It is a good performance, really. I give you credit. He turned to Mom and Dad, spreading his hands wide. Do you see what she is doing? She is acting. She probably slept with the real owner, or maybe she is blackmailing him to let her sit here for 5 minutes. It is a shell company. That is what this is. SG Holdings. It is a front for money laundering or something illegal, and she is the fall guy. He pointed a shaking finger at me. You are a front, Sophia. You are a distraction. You think because you sit in a leather chair that makes you a CEO, it makes you a fraud. Now tell us where the real Chairman Green is, so I can explain to him that my sister is having a mental breakdown. I did not speak. I did not defend myself. I simply reached out to the small control panel built into the surface of the black desk. I pressed a single button labeled Presentation Mode. The lights in the boardroom dimmed automatically. The blinds on the floor-to-ceiling windows descended, cutting off the glare of the sun. A massive high-definition screen descended from the ceiling with a soft, mechanical hum. Sit down, Darius, I said. I am not sitting down, he spat. I am leaving to find security. Look at the screen, I commanded. Darius looked. He couldn't help himself. The screen flickered to life. Slide 1 appeared. 1. It was a high-resolution scan of the deed to the building we were standing in. But it wasn't just the deed. It was the incorporation papers of SG Holdings. It listed the assets, the bank verification letters, the board of directors, and right there at the top in black and white was the name of the sole proprietor, Sophia Green. The date of incorporation was 5 years ago. The net worth of the company was listed clearly. It was a number with 8 zeros. Darius squinted at the screen. He leaned in closer. That is fake, he whispered. Anyone can Photoshop a document. You printed that at Kinko's. I pressed the next button on the console. Slide 2 was not a document. It was a video file. It was black and white grainy footage, but the image was crystal clear. It was the interior of a living room, my parents' living room. The timestamp in the corner was from 3 days ago. The video played. It showed Darius walking into the room. It showed him looking around nervously. It showed him kneeling in front of Mom's dresser. It showed him pulling out the velvet box, opening it, and shoving the diamond tennis bracelet into his pocket before pulling out his phone to make a call. My mother gasped. The sound was sharp and painful in the quiet room. "That is my bracelet," she whispered, her hand flying to her throat. "You said, Darius, you told me Sophia stole it. You told the police she took it." Darius turned pale. He began to sweat profusely. "Mom, that is taken out of context," he stammered, backing away from the screen. I was taking it to get it cleaned. For you. As a surprise. I wanted it to sparkle for the meeting today. I was protecting it." I pressed a button on the remote. An audio file played over the speakers. It was a recording of a phone call Darius made 5 minutes after leaving the condo. "Yeah, I got it." The voice of Darius boomed through the surround sound system. "It is old, but the diamonds are real. The pawn shop on 4th Street offered me $4,000. It is enough to buy the bribe for the meeting. Just tell Mom that Sophia was lurking around. She will believe anything bad about her." The recording ended. My mother stood up slowly. Her legs were shaking. She looked at her golden child, her pride and joy, with a look of absolute horror. "You pawned my mother's bracelet," she said, her voice breaking, "to bribe a billionaire, and you blamed your sister." I pressed the button again. "I am not done," I said. Slide 3 appeared. This was a series of screenshots. Text messages. They were the messages I had intercepted from Darius's phone. The thread with the contact named Candy Heart. The messages were blown up to 10 feet tall. Darius. Just told the old man he needs heart surgery. He bought it hook, line, and sinker. Candy Heart. You are terrible, LOL. Did you get the cash? Darius. Working on it. My sister is stubborn, but I will guilt trip her. As soon as the wire hits, we are booking Cabo. First class baby. Forget about Chloe, she thinks I am working late. The silence in the room was now heavy enough to crush bones. I looked at Chloe. She was standing very still. Her face, which was usually composed and ready for a selfie, was crumbling. Her mascara was starting to run. She looked at the screen, reading the words over and over again. Cabo. Candy. First class. She looked at Darius. You said we were broke, she whispered. You made me sell my car. You made me go on TikTok and beg strangers for money. You said it was for your dad. Darius held up his hands, palms out. Baby honey, look, let me explain. That is just banter. It is just talk. I was stressed. I never went to Cabo. It is not what it looks like. Then I looked at my father. Otis. He was staring at the screen at the words, heart surgery. He was touching his chest, but this time he wasn't faking. His face was gray. He realized that his own son had used his health, his life, as a bargaining chip for a vacation with a mistress. You lied to me, Otis wheezed. You told me the doctor said I was dying. You had me writing my will, Darius. I thought I was saying goodbye to my family. It was just a strategy, Dad, Darius yelled, losing control. I needed the money. I needed liquidity. I was going to pay you back. Once this deal went through, I was going to buy you a new house. I did it for us. I did it for the family. You did it for yourself, I said, my voice cutting through his panic. I stood up from the chair and walked around to the front of the desk, leaning against it. You stole from your mother. You cheated on your wife. You psychologically tortured your father. And you tried to destroy my reputation to cover your tracks. You are not a businessman, Darius. You are a parasite. Darius looked around the room. He saw the walls closing in. He saw the hatred in his wife's eyes, the disappointment in his parents' faces. He realized he had lost them. But then he looked at me and his eyes narrowed. He realized he still had one card to play, or so he thought. "Fine," he sneered, straightening his jacket. "You exposed me. Congratulations, Sophia. You win the moral victory. But guess what? You are still just a sister. You might own the building, but you do not employ me. My contract is with TechSoft. My boss loves me. Sterling trusts me. I will walk out of here, I will go back to my office, and I will spin this. I will tell Sterling, you are crazy. I will keep my job, and I will still be making 6 figures while you sit in this empty tower alone." He laughed again, regaining a sliver of his arrogance. "You cannot fire me, Sophia. You are just the landlord." I smiled. It was a small, cold smile. "You are right, Darius. I cannot fire you." I looked past Darius's shoulder toward the dark corner of the room, where a second leather chair had been turned away from the table facing the wall the entire time. "But he can." Darius turned around slowly, following my gaze. The leather chair in the corner swiveled around. Sitting there holding a glass of water, his face grim and unsmiling, was Jonathan Sterling, the CEO of TechSoft, Darius's boss. He had been in the room since before we arrived. He had watched the entire presentation. He had seen the theft. He had seen the texts. He had heard Darius call him a fool on the recording. Sterling stood up. He smoothed his suit jacket. He did not look at Darius with anger. He looked at him with something far worse. Indifference. Darius Sterling said calmly, "You are fired, effective immediately." Darius's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "Sir, Jonathan, I... that was doctored. Security is waiting in the hallway." Sterling continued, cutting him off. "You have 5 minutes to clear out your desk. If you are not out of the building in 10 minutes, I will have you arrested for corporate espionage and fraud." "And Darius?" Sterling paused, looking at the shattered family standing in the ruins of their pride. "Do not ask for a reference." Sterling turned to me and nodded respectfully. "Ms. Green, thank you for bringing these matters to my attention. I apologize that my employee caused you such distress. TechSoft would be honored to renegotiate our lease with you directly." I nodded back. "Thank you, Jonathan. We can discuss the terms later." I looked back at Darius. His face had gone from red to a sickly sheet white. The arrogance was gone. The swagger was gone. All that was left was a man standing in a suit he couldn't afford, surrounded by the people he had betrayed, with absolutely nowhere left to go. The door clicked shut behind Jonathan Sterling, leaving a silence in the room that was heavier than lead. Darius was standing there like a statue that had been dropped from a great height, cracked and crumbling, but still somehow standing. He looked at the closed door. Then he looked at me. His eyes were wild, darting back and forth as his brain tried to calculate a survival strategy that simply did not exist. "You did this," he whispered, his voice trembling, with a mix of fear and hatred. "You planned this. You got Sterling in here. You set me up." "I did not set you up, Darius," I said calmly, sitting back in the leather chair that was now indisputably mine. "I simply turned on the lights. You are the one who built the trap. I just watched you walk into it." He wiped sweat from his upper lip. "Fine. Okay, so I lost the job. Big deal. I have other offers. Headhunters call me every week. I will land on my feet. I always do. Come on, Chloe. Come on, Mom and Dad. Let's get out of here. This place smells like bleach anyway." He tried to muster some of his old arrogance, adjusting his suit jacket and turning to leave. He thought the worst was over. He thought he was just unemployed. He had no idea that the floor he was standing on was about to open up and swallow him whole. "Sit down, Darius," I said. "I am not finished." "I am leaving," he snapped. "You are not my boss. You are just a landlord." I pressed the intercom button on the desk. "Mr. Vance, please come in." The side door opened, and a man in a sharp gray suit walked in, holding a thick leather portfolio. My parents recognized him immediately. He was the family estate attorney, or at least he used to be until I hired him on a retainer 5 times higher than what they could afford. "What is he doing here?" my father asked, his voice weak. Mr. Vance placed a document on the table in front of Darius. Mr. Wilson Vance said, his tone devoid of emotion. "As the legal representative for SG Capital, a subsidiary of SG Holdings, I am here to execute Clause 7 of your loan agreement." Darius stared at the document. He didn't touch it. He knew what it was. "What loan?" my mother asked, looking between Darius and the lawyer. "Darius, what is he talking about?" I leaned forward. "Tell them, Darius. Tell them about the bridge loan you took out 6 months ago. The one you used to fund your lifestyle while you waited for your big bonus." Darius stayed silent, his face turning a sickly shade of green. "Fine, I will tell them," I said. Darius borrowed $200,000 from a private lending firm. He needed cash fast and his credit was shot, so he put up collateral. I looked at my parents. "He put up your condo." My mother let out a sharp cry. "No, that is not true. The condo is in a trust. He told us he put it in a trust to protect us from taxes. He put it in a trust that named him as the trustee with full power to leverage the asset," Vance clarified. "And he used that power to secure a high-interest loan against the property." "So what?" Darius shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "It is just a loan. I was going to pay it back. I am going to pay it back." I pointed to the document. "Read Clause 7, Darius." He didn't move, so I recited it from memory. Clause 7 states that in the event the borrower creates a material change in their financial status, specifically the loss of primary employment, the lender reserves the right to call the full balance of the loan due immediately. I let that sink in. "You just got fired, Darius. That is a material change." I looked at Vance. "Who owns that debt now?" Mr. Vance. "SG Capital acquired the debt portfolio of the original lender last week," Vance said. "Ms. Green is the primary creditor." I looked at Darius. "You owe me $200,000. And since you do not have a job, and you do not have the cash, I am calling the loan." "You can't do that?" Darius stammered. "I need time. You have to give me 30 days. Clause 7 says immediately," I corrected him. "And since you cannot pay, I am exercising my right to the collateral." I turned to my parents. "I am foreclosing on the condo. Today." My father made a sound like a wounded animal. He slumped forward, grabbing the edge of the table. "You are taking our home," he wheezed. "Sophia, you are taking your parents' home." "I am not taking it," I said coldly. "Darius sold it. I am just collecting what I bought." Chloe, who had been standing in stunned silence, suddenly found her voice. She rushed forward and slammed her hands on the desk, leaning over so her face was inches from mine. "You cannot do this!" she screamed, her mascara running down her cheeks in black streaks. "You evil witch! Those are your parents. We are family. You cannot evict your own family." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had mocked my clothes, who had laughed when I was humiliated, who had used my name to beg for money online. Family. I repeated, tasting the word like it was sour milk. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. I held it up so she could see the TikTok video paused on her face. "Yesterday on this video you told 40,000 people that I was a stranger. You said I was a monster who abandoned you. You told the world that I was not part of this family." I put the phone down. "I am just respecting your wishes, Chloe. I am a stranger. And strangers evict tenants who do not pay their rent." "But where will we go?" my mother sobbed. "We have nowhere to go." "Ask Darius," I said, pointing at my brother. "Maybe he can take you to Cabo." "Oh wait, he can't afford that either." Darius looked at me with eyes full of pure, unadulterated venom. "I will sue you," he hissed. "I will drag you to court. I will tell everyone that you used inside information. I will ruin you." I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. "You will have a hard time doing that from a cell, Darius." I nodded to the security camera in the corner. "Mr. Henderson, you can send them in now." The double doors at the back of the room burst open. But it wasn't just building security. Two officers from the Atlanta Police Department walked in, followed by a detective in a plain suit. "Darius Wilson?" the detective asked. Darius took a step back, knocking over his chair. "What is this?" "You are under arrest," the detective said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "For what?" Darius screamed as the officers grabbed his arms. "I didn't steal the bracelet. My mother said it was a misunderstanding." "We are not here for the bracelet," the detective said, spinning him around and slamming him against the wall. "We are here for embezzlement." I walked around the desk and stood next to the detective. I handed him a flash drive. "Here are the forensic accounting records from TechSoft," I said. It turns out that before Darius was fired, he managed to divert about $50,000 of company funds into a personal account. He thought he was clever hiding it as vendor payments. But when you own the building and you own the server farm, the data lives on, you see everything. Darius struggled against the cuffs, his face pressed against the silk wallpaper. "Sophia. Please," he begged, his dignity finally shattering completely. "Don't do this. I will pay it back. I will work for you. I will clean the floors. Please don't let me go to jail." I looked at him. I looked at the brother who had locked me in a closet, the brother who had mocked me for 10 years. I leaned in close, so only he could hear. "You are not qualified to clean my floors, Darius. My janitors are honest people." I turned to the head of security, who was standing by the door waiting for orders. "Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice ringing clear and final in the large room. "Yes, ma'am. Take out the trash." The officers dragged Darius out of the room, his shoes dragging on the carpet, his screams echoing down the hallway. Chloe ran after him, screaming his name. My parents stood there, homeless and childless, in the middle of a billion-dollar tower, looking at me with eyes that were finally, for the first time, seeing me clearly. I turned my back on them and looked out the window at the city that lay beneath my feet. The room was quiet. The trash was gone. And the air had never smelled so clean. The walk from the penthouse to the lobby was a funeral procession for Darius's ego. Two uniformed officers gripped his arms while Mr. Henderson, the head of security, led the way with the grim satisfaction of a man taking out the garbage. I walked a few paces behind them, maintaining a safe distance from the wreckage I had just orchestrated. My parents and Chloe trailed behind me, stumbling in a daze, their faces pale, and their movements jerky like marionettes whose strings had been cut. When the elevator doors opened into the main lobby, the lunch rush had begun. The space was filled with young professionals, tech entrepreneurs, and lawyers, the exact demographic Darius had spent his life trying to impress. Now they stopped their conversations and turned to watch. They saw the regional sales director, the man who had strutted through these doors only hours earlier, like he owned the place, now being marched out in handcuffs. Darius kept his head down, staring at the polished marble floor, trying to hide his face. But anonymity was a luxury he had lost the moment he tried to destroy me. Chloe was walking beside him, her heels clicking rapidly as she tried to keep up. But as she looked around at the crowd, seeing the cell phones raised to record the spectacle, something in her demeanor shifted. The fear in her eyes was replaced by a cold, calculating self-preservation. She realized that Darius wasn't just broke, he was a social pariah. He was a sinking ship, and Chloe had never been one to drown for loyalty. "Darius," she hissed, her voice sharp enough to cut through the murmurs of the crowd, "tell them this is a mistake. Tell them to take the cuffs off. People are filming. I can't." "Chloe," Darius whispered, his voice cracking, "just call my lawyer. Call the firm. Get me bail. Bail." Chloe stopped walking. The officers kept moving, dragging Darius with them, forcing him to twist his neck to look back at his wife. "You want me to pay bail?" Chloe laughed, a harsh, brittle sound that drew even more stares. "With what money, Darius? You spent it all. You spent my money. You spent your parents' money. You spent money you didn't even have." "Chloe, please," Darius begged, looking more pathetic than I had ever seen him. "We can fix this. We are a team. Remember the power couple." "The power couple," she repeated, shaking her head. There is no power couple. There is just a felon and the woman he lied to. She reached down to her left hand. With a violent tug, she pulled off the diamond engagement ring, or what I now suspected was likely a cubic zirconia, given Darius's financial habits. I am not going down with you, she screamed. She threw the ring. It hit Darius square in the chest, bounced off his lapel and skittered across the marble floor. I am filing for divorce tomorrow, she yelled. Don't call me from jail. Don't write me letters. You are dead to me. Darius watched the ring spin to a stop near the security desk. He looked at Chloe, his eyes filled with betrayal, but she had already turned her back on him. She pulled out her phone, likely to delete every photo of him from her Instagram before she even left the building. The officers pushed Darius through the revolving doors and into the back of a waiting squad car. As the siren chirped and the lights flashed, painting the street in bursts of red and blue, my brother disappeared from my life. I stood on the sidewalk, the midday sun warming the fabric of my white suit. The show was over. The crowd in the lobby began to disperse, returning to their lattes and spreadsheets. But two people were still standing there. My parents. Otis and Patricia Wilson stood on the curb looking at the empty space where the police car had been. They looked small. Without Darius to prop them up, without his lies to inflate their egos, they looked like what they were, two elderly people who had gambled their retirement on a fantasy and lost everything. They turned slowly to look at me. I signaled to the valet. He nodded and ran to retrieve my car. Sophia, my mother said, her voice trembling. She took a step toward me, reaching out a hand that shook with age and fear. I didn't move away, but I didn't reach back. I just watched her. Sophia, please, she said, tears finally spilling over her cheeks. We didn't know. You have to believe us. Darius, he told us he was handling everything. He told us the loan was safe. He told us you were the one causing trouble. He is a liar, Otis added, his voice hoarse. He deceived his own father. He almost gave me a heart attack for real with that stress. We are victims here too, Sophia. I listened to them rewrite history in real time. 5 minutes ago I was the enemy. Now suddenly I was the only lifeboat in the ocean and they were desperate to climb aboard. The valet pulled up to the curb. He wasn't driving my old Honda Accord. He was behind the wheel of my Continental GT, a sleek, deep blue beast of a car that cost more than the house they had just lost. The engine purred with a low, powerful rumble. My parents stared at the car. Their eyes widened. This was the tangible proof of the wealth they had mocked, the success they had claimed I was incapable of achieving. Is that yours? My mother whispered. I took the keys from the valet and tipped him $100. Thank you, Marcus. I walked to the driver's side door. Sophia, wait! My mother cried out, rushing forward and grabbing the handle of the car door before I could open it. Where are you going? You can't leave us here. We have nowhere to go. The lawyer said we are evicted. They are changing the locks today. She looked at me with pleading eyes, the same eyes that had looked at me with disgust at the anniversary party. We are your parents, she sobbed. We are old. We are sick. You are a good girl, Sophia. You have always been the responsible one, the kind one. You wouldn't let your mother sleep on the street, would you? We can come stay with you, just until we get back on our feet. We can help you around the house. We can be a family again. I looked at her hand clutching the door handle. I looked at my father, who was nodding eagerly behind her. A family, I repeated. Yes, she said, forcing a hopeful smile. A family. We forgive you, Sophia. We forgive you for the scene upstairs. We know you were just upset. Let's just go home. I felt a laugh bubble up in my chest, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was cold and sharp. They forgave me. They were standing on the precipice of homelessness because of their own greed, and they were offering me forgiveness. I opened the car door, forcing my mother to step back. I slid into the cream leather seat and started the ignition. The dashboard lit up like the cockpit of a jet. I lowered the window just halfway. My mother leaned in her face framed by the window. "So shall we get in the back? Or do you want me to sit up front with you?" I looked at her, really looked at her for the last time. I saw the fear, yes, but I also saw the calculation. She didn't love me. She just needed a new host to attach herself to now that Darius was gone. "Mom," I said softly. "Yes, sweetie. Do you remember what you told me when I arrived at the party on Friday? You told me that the help should use the back door. You told me not to embarrass you. You told me to stay invisible." Her smile faltered. That was just a misunderstanding. I was stressed. "And do you remember what you said at dinner?" I continued. "You said you wished you hadn't given birth to me. You said I was a stranger." "Sophia, please," she begged, gripping the window frame. I gently pried her fingers off the glass. "I am respecting your wishes, Mom. I am staying invisible." I put the car in drive. "And as for coming with me," I shook my head. "My insurance policy has a strict rule." "What rule?" she asked, tears streaming down her face again. I looked straight ahead at the open road. "I don't drive strangers." I pressed the button and the window rolled up, sealing me inside my silent, safe, expensive world. My mother pounded on the glass, her mouth moving in silent screams, my father standing behind her, looking defeated and small. I didn't look back. I merged into traffic, leaving them standing on the curb in the heat of the Atlanta afternoon, with nothing but their Sunday clothes and the consequences of their own choices. The rearview mirror showed them getting smaller and smaller until they were just specks in the distance, and then finally they were gone. 6 months is a long time in the world of business, but in the world of consequences, it can feel like an eternity. The seasons had changed in Atlanta, turning the humid summer air into a crisp autumn breeze that swept through the streets, scattering leaves like old debts being settled. I stood in front of a newly renovated brick building in the historic West End district, holding a pair of oversized ceremonial scissors. A crowd had gathered, not the social climbers and sycophants who populated Darius's world, but real people. Teachers, social workers, and families from the neighborhood. Above the entrance, a modest silver plaque gleamed in the afternoon sun. It read, "The Nana Rose Community Center." I had named it after my grandmother, the only person in my family who had ever looked at me with love instead of calculation. She had died penniless, but she had been rich in kindness, and now her name would shelter at-risk youth, providing them with the mentorship and resources I had to fight tooth and nail to find for myself. As I cut the red ribbon and the crowd cheered, I felt a warmth in my chest that no amount of money could buy. It was the feeling of building something that would outlast me, something that wasn't built on lies. After the ceremony, I drove back to the SG Tower. My routine had not changed much, though the atmosphere in the building certainly had. There was a new energy in the hallways, a sense of purpose and integrity that trickled down from the top floor. But as I rode the elevator up to the penthouse, I allowed myself a moment to think about the people who used to occupy this space in my mind. I had received a letter from the Department of Corrections yesterday. It was from Darius. He is currently serving a 3 to 5 year sentence at a minimum security facility in South Georgia. The plea deal for embezzlement and fraud had been lenient, mostly because I had refused to testify at the sentencing hearing. I didn't want to see him. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of my presence. I opened the letter once out of morbid curiosity. It was written on cheap lined paper and pencil. There was no apology. There was no remorse. It was just a list of complaints. He hated the food. The bed hurt his back. He needed money for the commissary because the other inmates didn't respect him. He still blamed everyone else. He blamed the lawyer for being incompetent. He blamed Chloe for abandoning him. He blamed me for being vindictive. I didn't finish reading it. I shredded it and dropped it into the recycling bin. Darius was still living in a prison of his own making long before the cell door locked behind him. He was trapped in his own ego, and I finally realized that was a sentence no judge could overturn. As for Chloe, justice had been poetic in a way that almost felt scripted. With Darius gone and the assets frozen, she had been forced to face the reality of her own lack of skills. The influencer lifestyle evaporated the moment the credit cards were declined. I saw her a few weeks ago. I didn't mean to, but I was driving through the suburbs and stopped for coffee at a diner. She was there. She was wearing a beige uniform, with an apron stained with ketchup. She looked older. The Botox had worn off, and the filler had dissolved, leaving her face looking tired and human. She was rushing between tables carrying a heavy tray of pancakes, getting yelled at by a customer who wanted a refill. She saw me. I was sitting in a booth wearing a cashmere coat reading the paper. Our eyes locked across the busy diner. For a second I saw a flash of the old Chloe, the one who would have sneered and made a comment about my shoes. But then the manager yelled at her to pick up an order. She flinched. She looked down at her orthopedic shoes and hurried into the kitchen. She was finally doing honest work. She was finally the help she had so despised. I tipped the server $100 and left before she came back out. My parents were the hardest chapter to close. Without the condo, without Darius, and without my financial support, their house of cards collapsed within weeks. The foreclosure went through. They had no savings, having spent it all on appearances and bail money for a son who couldn't be saved. They now live in a state-assisted senior living facility about an hour south of the city. It is not a bad place. It is clean. It is safe. But it is sterile. It has beige walls and fluorescent lights and smells faintly of bleach and boiled vegetables. It is a far cry from the country club lifestyle they pretended to have. I visit them once a month, not because I want to, but because I am not them. I bring them groceries. I ensure they have their medications. When I visit, we sit in the common room. We talk about the weather. We talk about the traffic. We never talk about the past. My father sits in his chair staring out the window, a shadow of the man he used to be. My mother talks incessantly about small things, trying to fill the silence, trying to pretend that she isn't sitting in a state-run home because she bet on the wrong child. She asked me once if I could buy them a small house. Just a little cottage, she had said, her eyes wet with tears. I told her no. I told her that I had paid for their housing for 10 years, and they had thanked me by trying to destroy me. I told her that this was the life they had built. It was harsh, but it was the truth. And in the end, the truth was the only thing I was willing to offer them. I arrived at my office and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows. The sun was setting over Atlanta, painting the skyline in hues of violet and burnt orange. The city lights were flickering on a vast grid of electricity and ambition. I looked down at the streets below, where tiny cars moved like ants. I remembered driving my old Honda down those streets, worrying about the squeaky belt, worrying about whether my family would ever love me, worrying about being good enough. I turned away from the window and looked at my reflection in the glass. I saw a woman in a white suit. I saw a woman who ran a multi-million-dollar empire. I saw a woman who was free. I walked over to my desk and picked up a framed photo of my grandmother. She was the only family I kept on display. Darius was right about one thing that night at the party. It was the only honest thing he ever said to me, even if he meant it as an insult. He called me a janitor. He thought it was a slur. He thought it meant I was low. He thought it meant I was dirty. But as I looked around my quiet, peaceful office with no screaming parents, no lying brother, and no manipulative sister, I realized he had given me the perfect title. Because a janitor's job isn't just to wipe up spills. It is to recognize trash when they see it. It is to have the discipline to scrub away the grime that builds up over years. It is to have the strength to haul the garbage out to the curb and not look back. I smiled at the empty room. They called me a janitor. They were right. I cleaned the most toxic things out of my life. And now, for the first time in 35 years, everything is finally clean. This journey taught me that true worth is never defined by a job title or a price tag, but by the integrity we carry when no one is watching. My family saw a janitor and assumed I was worthless, failing to realize that the discipline used to scrub floors is the same grit used to build empires. We often cling to toxic relationships out of obligation, but I learned that you cannot build a healthy future on a rotten foundation. Sometimes the most powerful move you can make is to fire the people who don't respect your value. If you have ever had to stand tall against those who underestimated you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice and resilience. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that they are the owner of their own destiny.